It was a quiet morning in the small southern town of Willow Creek. The sun had just begun to rise, casting a soft gold light over the quiet streets. The houses all looked neat and fresh, painted in pale blues, soft grays, and warm white. Lawns were trimmed, flower beds were blooming, and birds chirped happily from the trees. It was the kind of place where people nodded politely to each other and waved from their porches. In this peaceful setting, an old black man named Mr. William Carter walked slowly down one of the neighborhood sidewalks. He wore worn jeans, a faded flannel shirt, and a brown cap that had seen many summers. His boots were dusty, and his steps were slow, but steady. He looked around as he walked, as if remembering something, his eyes kind and thoughtful. He turned into one of the front yards and walked up to the porch of a pale yellow house. The house was beautiful. Large windows, white columns, and a wooden swing hanging from one end of the porch. Mr. Carter didn't knock or ring the bell. Instead, he slowly sat down on the steps, took off his hat, and looked out across the yard. His hands rested in his lap. For a while he didn't move, just breathed in the morning air. Across the street, behind a curtain, a neighbor was watching. The woman didn't recognize Mr. Carter. She didn't see an old man quietly enjoying the sun. She saw someone out of place. She picked up her phone and called the police. "There's a strange man sitting on someone's porch," she said. "He doesn't belong here. I think he's trespassed." Within minutes, a black and white police car rolled up. The sound of tires on gravel broke the quiet. Officer Jenna Reeves stepped out. She was in her late 20s, dressed neatly in her blue uniform. She had blonde hair tied back in a bun, and a notepad tucked in her back pocket. She was fairly new to the job, still learning, but eager to do things right. She looked at Mr. Carter on the steps. He didn't seem dangerous, but the neighbor had sounded worried, and Officer Reeves knew she had to check it out. She walked up the path with careful steps, keeping her voice calm. "Sir?" she called. "Can I help you?" Mr. Carter looked up slowly, peaceful and calm. "No, ma'am," he said kindly. "Just resting a bit. It's a beautiful morning." Officer Reeves stopped a few feet away. "This is someone's private property," she said. "Do you know the owner?" Mr. Carter looked back at the porch. "I know this place very well," he said softly. "I helped build it, long ago." She blinked, unsure of what he meant. Tension hung in the air, light as a thread but growing stronger. The porch, the uniform, the quiet town. Nothing seemed wrong, but something didn't feel right either. The morning, which started so normal, was beginning to change. Officer Jenna Reeves stood still for a moment, unsure of what to say. The man on the porch didn't seem like a threat. His hands were resting on his knees. His voice was gentle, and his eyes didn't hold fear or anger. They held something else. Something deeper. Maybe sadness, maybe memory. But the radio on Jenna's shoulder crackled again. The dispatcher reminded her that a neighbor was watching, that someone was afraid. And fear, even if small, had to be taken seriously. That's what she had been trained to believe. "Sir," she said again, trying to keep her voice polite, but firm, "I need to ask you to leave this property. You can't sit here without the owner's permission." Mr. Carter didn't move. "Miss," he said, "I'm not hurting anyone. I'm just sitting where I used to sit, back when this house was new. I know this place like the lines on my hands." Jenna frowned slightly. "You say you built this house?" "I did," he said simply. "Me and 2 other men, back in the summer of 1975. We laid the bricks ourselves." Jenna looked around. The house looked too new, too perfect. It didn't seem like it had been standing for 50 years. The idea didn't make sense to her. "I'm sorry, sir," she said, a little more firmly now. "But unless you can prove that, I have to ask you to leave. The current owners aren't home, and the neighbor said they've never seen you before." Mr. Carter slowly stood up. His knees creaked as he rose, but he stood tall. "This house was mine long before any of them came here," he said, not with anger, but with quiet strength. "I put in the floors. I painted the walls. I rocked my baby girl on this very porch." Jenna hesitated. She didn't want to be rude, but she had a duty. She had been called for trespassing, and this man didn't have ID. He hadn't asked permission to be here. I'm going to have to ask for your name, she said, and I need to take you in to clear things up. Mr. Carter nodded slowly. Do what you think is right. But I've done nothing wrong. That was the hardest part for Jenna. He wasn't arguing. He wasn't yelling or threatening. He looked tired. Not just from the morning. From years. From something she couldn't name. Still, her hand went to her belt. She pulled out the handcuff. I'm sorry, she said softly. Please turn around. Mr. Carter did. She placed the cuffs around his wrists. His skin was warm. His hands were large, calloused from years of work. As she led him to the car, she felt eyes on her neighbors peeking from windows, a dog barking in the distance. The town was watching, but no one was speaking. Mr. Carter didn't look back at the porch. He just walked steady and slow toward the police car. Officer Reeves opened the back door for him. He ducked slightly and got inside. The door shut with a quiet click, but the sound echoed in Jenna's ear. Something didn't feel right. She looked once more at the porch. The swing swayed just a little in the wind, as if someone had just left it. The ride to the station was quiet. Officer Reeves kept checking the rearview mirror. Mr. Carter didn't say a word. He just looked out the window, watching the town pass by. His hands rested gently in his lap, still in the cuffs. At the station, the sun was higher now, casting sharp shadows on the sidewalk. Jenna helped Mr. Carter out of the car and walked him inside. The front desk officer gave her a look but didn't say anything. She sat Mr. Carter down on a bench in the lobby and told him she'd be back in a few minutes. Inside the small office, she started typing up the report. Possible trespassing. Suspect said he helped build the house. She paused, frowning. Something about it still didn't feel right. Just then Sergeant Daniels walked in. He was tall, with deep brown skin and silver at his temples. He'd been with the department for more than 30 years. Quiet, but wise. Everyone respected him. Hey Jenna, he said, stretching his shoulders. You bring someone in? Yes sir, she replied. Older gentleman. Says he built one of the houses in Willow Creek but was sitting on the porch without permission. Neighbor called it in. Daniels raised an eyebrow. Which house? 2037 Rosewood Drive. Yellow. With the porch swing. His face changed. Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, maybe even recognition. Wait a minute, he said. You didn't say the man's name. I don't know it yet, Jenna admitted. He didn't give up. Said his name was William Carter, I think. Sergeant Daniels stood still. Then he turned and walked quickly toward the lobby. When he saw Mr. Carter sitting there in handcuffs, he stopped cold. Then, with deep respect in his voice, he said, Mr. Carter, is that really you? Carter looked up and smiled softly. Well, I'll be Samuel Daniels. Haven't seen you since your daddy's funeral. Daniels chuckled, then looked sharply at Jenna. You arrested Mr. William Carter? Do you even know who this man is? Jenna felt her face grow hot. No, he was on someone's porch. The neighbor didn't recognize him. Sergeant Daniels shook his head slowly. Mr. Carter is a legend in this town. He built nearly a dozen houses in Willow Creek, back when they barely let a black man buy nails. He was building homes. Jenna stared. You mean, he really did build that house? Yes, Daniels said firmly, with his own 2 hands. My uncle helped him. I was just a kid, but I remember watching them lay the bricks in the summer heat. He walked over to Mr. Carter and gently unlocked the cuffs. I'm so sorry. You never should have been treated like this. Mr. Carter rubbed his wrists but didn't look angry. It's all right, he said softly. She didn't know. The world forgets people like me. Jenna felt a lump rise in her throat. She didn't know what to say. She had followed the rule, but the rules didn't tell the whole story. They didn't tell who had built the homes, who had been erased. She followed Sergeant Daniels into the back office. He opened an old cabinet and pulled out a photo album. Inside were black and white pictures of the early days of the neighborhood. Men in work clothes, trucks, bricks, dust. In one photo, a much younger Mr. Carter stood in front of the yellow house, his hands on his hips, smiling proudly. She stared at the photo. There was no doubt. It was him. The man she had arrested for trespassing had built the very house she dragged him away from, and the porch he sat on. It had been his first. The drive back to Mr. Carter's house was slow and quiet. Officer Reeves didn't turn on the radio. She kept glancing at Mr. Carter in the passenger seat. His face was calm, looking out the window like before, but now she knew what those eyes had seen: decades of work, of being overlooked, of being remembered only when someone got scared. "I'm sorry," she said softly, gripping the wheel. "I didn't know." Mr. Carter turned his head and looked at her. "I know you didn't," he replied. "That's the world we live in." Jenna swallowed. "But it's not right." "No, it's not," he said gently, "but I've lived long enough to know that right and wrong aren't always seen the same way by everybody." They pulled into the driveway of a small house near the edge of town. It was clean but plain, with peeling paint and a crooked mailbox. Mr. Carter didn't seem bothered by it. He opened the car door and stepped out slowly. Jenna got out too. She wasn't ready to leave. "Miss Carter," she asked, "why were you sitting on that porch today?" He stood still for a moment, then looked up at the sky. "My wife loved that house," he said after a long pause. "Her name was Sarah. We saved every penny to build it. I worked on it every night, after my shift at the mill, laid every brick myself. She used to sit on that porch swing in the evenings, humming gospel songs." He smiled faintly, but his eyes looked far away. "When she died," he continued, "I sold the house. I couldn't afford to keep it. They didn't want a black man living in that part of town back then anyway. Folks were polite, but doors stayed closed." Jenna felt a tightness in her chest. "After all those years," he said, "I just wanted to sit there again, just for a minute, just to remember her." Jenna didn't know what to say. No rulebook had ever prepared her for this. "I never meant to cause trouble," Mr. Carter added. "I just wanted to go home for a little while." And with that, he walked up his porch steps, turned the key and went inside. Jenna sat back in the car, hands resting in her lap. The engine was off, but the thoughts in her mind were loud. How many stories like Mr. Carter's had been forgotten? How many hands had built the homes people lived in now? Hands that were never thanked, only watched with suspicion. She realized something that day. Not all laws were fair, not all fears were honest, and not all trespassers were strangers. Sometimes, the ones we fear the most are the ones we owe the most. And sometimes, the quietest people carry the deepest history. News of what happened to Mr. Carter spread through Willow Creek quickly. It wasn't on the TV or in the newspaper, but people talked. They talked at the grocery store, in church pews, and under the oak trees in front yards. Whispers became conversations, and conversations became questions. "Did you hear what happened to Mr. Carter? He built that house. You mean the man they thought was trespassing actually made it with his own hands?" Some people were shocked, others were embarrassed. Many simply hadn't known. They hadn't thought to ask who had laid the bricks, hammered the nails, or poured the foundation of the homes they loved so much. Officer Jenna Reeves couldn't stop thinking about it. She'd grown up in Willow Creek. She had passed those homes 100 times. She knew the families inside, but she hadn't known about Mr. Carter, or his wife, or the porch swing. A week later, she went back to 2037 Rosewood Drive, not in uniform but in jeans and a sweatshirt. She knocked on the door. A young couple answered, confused at first, but when Jenna told them the story, their faces changed. "That man built this place," the woman whispered. "We had no idea. He should be honored," the man said quietly. So they did something about it. The next month, a group of neighbors, black, white, young and old, gathered on the front lawn of 20. Someone had made a wooden sign, polished and simple. It read, "This house was built by William Carter, 1975. Mr. Carter stood quietly beside Officer Reeves. He wore his old brown cap and his best Sunday shirt. His hands were clasped in front of him. When the sign was placed in the ground near the porch, the crowd clapped gently. Some people wiped their eyes. The couple who lived in the house invited Mr. Carter to sit on the porch swing. He did. For a long time, he just sat there, looking out at the street like before. But this time, nobody called the police. Nobody asked him to leave. He belonged there, and now, everyone knew it. Jenna sat on the steps beside him. "I'm sorry again," she said. He nodded. "Thank you for listening. That's more than most do." She smiled, her heart lighter than it had been in weeks. She had made a mistake, but she had learned, and because of that, others had learned too. The neighborhood didn't change overnight, but something small shifted. People started asking more questions. The local school invited Miss Carter to speak. Kids listened as he talked about building homes during a time when he wasn't allowed to sit at the same lunch counters as white men. They listened, and they remembered. That porch, once a place of quiet sorrow, became a symbol of respect, and the man who had once been called suspicious became a part of Willow Creek's story, a name no longer forgotten, because history lives, not just in books, but in bricks and wood and people. And now, thanks to a mistake that became a lesson, Willow Creek would remember Mr. William Carter always. If this story moved you, take a moment to reflect, share your thoughts in the comments, and start conversations that matter. Like this story to show your support for voices that deserve to be heard. Subscribe for more powerful real-life stories that remind us of the people history too often forgets.